Hello everyone and welcome to our latest project video. Today I'll be showcasing the purple Crackle and Decoupage design. We had already prepared our MDF board canvas by taping off a section in the middle of the board where our decoupage design would lay. This was done so our base coat of paint wouldn't cover any more of the board unnecessarily. So we started our project by painting this central rectangle in cotton by Magic Paint using a Posh Chalk large smooth and blend brush. We did this because we find that a light, preferably white, backdrop makes the colours in the decoupage we lay over top of it really stand out. This coat of paint was force dried before we peeled off the tape, as it had served its purpose now. We then laid our chosen decoupage design, the Posh Chalk Posh in Purple Deluxe Decoupage, over top of the white square. This showed us the size of area that we had to work with, so we centred the part of the design that we wanted to use as a centrepiece for the project, and lightly marked where we needed to cut with a pencil onto the decoupage paper. To ensure straight cut edges, we then cut along a measuring square until we were left with a rectangular section of the decoupage perfectly sized for our project. Now it was time to actually apply this section of decoupage. So we began by applying a coat of Posh Chalk pigment infuser to the bottom half of the central white rectangle using a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush. The bottom half of our decoupage section was then laid on top of the freshly applied infuser and smoothed down with a dry Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush. We did this starting in the centre and smoothing outwards to ensure that we removed any creases or bubbles that formed. This process was then repeated for the top half of our decoupage section. We recommend doing your decoupage applications one half at a time like this, as it is much easier to remove any creases or bubbles this way. To finalise the application and seal the decoupage to the surface, we then applied a thicker coat of infuser on top, again using a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush. This was then force dried with a heat gun so that we could continue straight away, and we decided it would be best to tape off the edges of the decoupage so that we didn't have to be careful not to paint over it during the next stage of this project. Using a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush, we covered the entire outer part of our canvas in a coat of Serendipity by Magic Paint. We noticed while drying it with a heat gun, it needed a second coat. Once this had been applied and force dried, we moved on to attaching our chosen trim, TR753. First, the trim was warmed up in its coil until it was malleable. We then removed the tape we had used earlier and tore off 4 appropriately sized sections of our trim that we could use to create a frame around our decoupage design. We made sure to leave a little excess on each of these sections of trim so that we could easily mitre the corners later. One of these sections was then heated until it was malleable again, before we spread wood glue across its entire footprint, pressed it down onto the surface and removed any excess glue with a wet paintbrush. This process was then repeated for the other 3 sections until we had created a border around the central decoupage image. As we had left some excess on each side that was overlapping at the corners, the mitring process was very easy. As you can see, we simply heated where the trims overlapped with a heat gun and then cut diagonally in line with the corners. Then, once we removed the parts of the trim we'd cut off, we were able to apply wood glue to the canvas and the ends of the trims and push them together into a seamless looking corner. This was repeated for the other 3 corners before we moved on. We wanted to give this piece a bit of an antique aesthetic, so our next step was to apply a layer of Posh Chalk crackling gel. This was done with a Posh Chalk small smooth and blend brush on the entire outer section of the board, not the trim we had just attached or the central decoupage section. While this coat was allowed to dry naturally, we decanted some of the Posh Chalk crackling enamel into a small tub in order to colour it. For this project, we had selected the Posh Chalk Pine Forest and Royal Indigo colour kits, adding a drop of each to our decanted enamel. As we mixed these colours in, we realised a little more green was necessary for this mixture to really stand out on the surface. So another drop of pine forest was added to create the perfect shade. This coloured crackling enamel mixture was then applied on top of our crackling gel coat, again with a Posh Chalk Small Smooth and Blend brush. Once we were satisfied with the application, we force dried the coat with a heat gun. You can already see the cracks forming as it dries. Our next step was to paint the trim border we had created. To do this, we chose the Posh Chalk Violet metallic paste. When we opened it and stirred the pot of paste, we actually noticed it was a little bit stiffer than it should be, as we had not used it in quite a while. This was easily fixed by pouring in just a little bit of the Posh Chalk paste lubricant and stirring the pot until it was a nice and creamy paste again. This metallic paste was then applied to the entire border using a Posh Chalk wax extender brush. Any that overlapped onto the rest of the design, we simply wiped away with kitchen roll, and then the coat of paste was force dried. Although we already loved how this design looked so far, we thought it needed a little more variance and that the cracks didn't quite stand out enough. To remedy this, we decanted a couple scoops of the Posh Chalk Lemon Gold metallic pigment onto an old WoodUbend board. We then gradually added Posh Chalk pigment infuser and stirred them together until we arrived at the consistency we wanted for this design. This pigment mixture was then applied to the entire outer section of the design with a Posh Chalk wax extender brush. We only did this to small sections at a time so that we could wipe most of it off of the surface before it dried. This meant that we would be left with these perfect golden highlights inside the cracks that our crackling enamel coat had created earlier. Once we were satisfied with this application of our pigments, we also brushed it over the peaks of our trim border, in order to really tie the piece together with an antique feel. So, here is the result. We loved how all of the different elements came together to create our very own custom-made antique piece of artwork. Please let us know in the comments below what you thought of this, and if we inspired you to start your own project, let us know. We would love to see it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, it really helps us out. And if you want to see a new project video every single week, subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.